Again, welcome to Africatown Community Land Trust's presentation of new models for creating thriving Black communities and inclusive cities. A conversation series of the hashtag Thriving Black Communities campaign. Now let's welcome your Emmy Award-winning host, Trayana Holiday.
Oh, thank you so much once again, John. Really appreciate being here with all of you. And thank you guys for joining us for the third part of this 4-part conversation series. We are so glad that you are here with us, giving us some of your time. As John mentioned there at the top here, as people were joining, we want to make sure we get the chat active. So please tell us what you know about Black Wall Streets. There were many of them, and maybe some of you have some great information you want to share with us. We want to start getting that chat going because, of course, later on, you guys will be able to utilize that chat to ask questions of our guests today. So we want to welcome you to new models for creating thriving Black communities and inclusive cities. This is a 4-part virtual conversation series hosted by Africatown Community Land Trust with nonprofits from 4 historical Black neighborhoods across the country. These nonprofits include Southwest Georgia Project, Houston Land Bank, Hill CDC, and Avalon Village. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We are so happy to have you be a part of this conversation. And if this is your second or third session with us, welcome back. We are all across the country as community members, stakeholders, and nonprofit leaders fighting to rebuild historic Black neighborhoods. For the past 3 weeks, you have joined us from the Central District of Seattle to the Hill District of Pittsburgh, from the Virgin Islands to Nova Scotia, all to build community, share resources and information with each other, ask the hard questions, and most importantly, explore new models and time-tested strategies for rebuilding historic Black neighborhoods. We are here because we are fighting to combat Black land loss. Our communities face economic insecurity. We urgently need access to quality, affordable housing and home ownership opportunities. And we want to build beautiful spaces that promote the well-being of our communities. That's why this conversation series, it is so important to all of us to address these urgent issues. Our session today, Building Black Wall Streets, is the third of our 4-part series. You'll be listening to ACLT CEO and President Wyking Garrett once again, and Marimba Millions will be joining us, the CEO and President of the Hill CDC, about how we can create new Black economic and cultural meccas like Tulsa, Oklahoma once was. And we'll hear about the importance of supporting Black entrepreneurship as a pillar for social change, as well as how we can overcome the challenges to economic development in Black communities. After Wyking and Marimba speak, we will open the floor to questions, and we want you to be a part of the conversation. Okay, y'all? In fact, let's start right now. Like I said, go to the chat. You guys can tell us where you're from, maybe what you know about Black Wall Streets, anything you know about economic development in your community. And you can even put I don't know, or IDK if you want to do it shorthand. You can go ahead and put that into the chat too. We just want to get you guys active in that chat. And also, we want to learn about who our audience is today. So please feel free to put that information right there in the chat. At the end, of course, as I said, you'll also have the opportunity to utilize the chat feature to make sure that any questions you have are hopefully answered by our guest panel here today. We're going to make sure that you guys also get the opportunity to make an investment directly into ACLT, Africatown Community Land Trust, and Hill CDC at the end. So one of the things we've been doing on this series is we are utilizing the hashtag Thriving Black Communities as we continue these conversations online for the next week. So if you guys get online, social media, utilize the hashtag Thriving Black Communities so that we can continue this conversation in that realm on social media. You guys will also get access to these amazing organizations through their websites. For Africatown, it's africatownlandtrust.org. And for the Hill CDC, it will be hilldistrict.org. We'll be making sure that those are in there. We also have opportunities for you to share this stream. If you guys are really enjoying this conversation, we want to make sure that you guys know how to share the stream. So please, share it with your friends and family, anybody that you know could really appreciate these conversations, and maybe they have something great to add in terms of any questions they may have, or sharing their experiences of what building Black Wall Streets has meant for them. So we're going to get started right now. I just want to give you guys a short bio of each one of our speakers today, so you guys can be familiar with their work. Our first guest, she is president and CEO of the Hill Community Development Corporation, Hill CDC, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania's historic Hill District neighborhood. She has led negotiations of a community benefits agreement with the National Hockey League's Pittsburgh Penguins to assure equitable development for a historic tract of land in the heart of fast-growing Pittsburgh. The establishment of a citywide affordable housing task force and the largest tax financing district in the history of the city of Pittsburgh were sealed as a part of the negotiations. Her organization has pipelined and is preparing over 400 renters for home ownership, and recently launched a residential and commercial community land trust. Most notable is her work toward building a Black cultural and commercial neighborhood district, New Granada Square, which will be an iconic example of how culture can be a surefire economic development tool. Let's welcome Marimba Millions.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here with you, Trayana. Thank you for the introduction.
Thank you so much for being with us. Can't wait to hear all of the amazing expertise that you have on this topic today for this conversation. Absolutely. And of course, our host for today's conversation, a third-generation community builder and social entrepreneur, current president and CEO of Africatown Community Land Trust, or ACLT. He has been a co-catalyst for numerous ventures, including the Africatown Seattle Community Development Initiative, Liberty Bank Building, Umoja Peace Center, Hack the CD, Black Dot, Umoja Fest, Africatown Center for Education and Innovation, and King County Equity Now. You guys, let's welcome Wyking Garrett.
Peace. Good to be here. Good to see you, Trey, Marimba. I'm looking forward to this conversation. It's relevant, right here in the Central District, all the way to the Hill District, which is, we say the Africatown or Black Wall Street in Pittsburgh, and all over this, the country, and then even other countries. So how do we really, get back to circulating our dollars in our community and practical tools and things that are happening that can be, learned from, replicated, modified, improved upon. So excited to be here. Thank you.
So glad to have you both with us. Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, just making sure. Well, first question here, Marimba and Wyking, both of you have years of experience in policy, advocacy, community organizing, and community development. We just want both of you to share a little bit about your personal background and that earliest activism that you've had and how those experiences have informed your current work, specifically around economic development in Black communities. We'll go ahead and start with you, Ms. Marimba.
Thank you. Wow, my earliest experiences, what a great question. Well, I was born into a family of activists who were also elected officials and educators. So my earliest days were literally when I was a child, when my father was running for school board and my mother was running for school board, knocking on doors with them. And I would say that, and that continued all throughout my schooling as well as college, and then as a young professional who had an interest in kind of tech and also community development, but didn't have a name for it at the time. I would say that those formative years for me in my earliest days really helped me to be grounded in community, in understanding, that the concept of community development must be anchored in what the community's idea for itself is. And so I am a big believer in self-determination. And so I think that it's very important for a community to own the vision that it has for itself, and to work with critical stakeholders to ensure that that vision is carried out.
Thank you so much, Marimba. Great start to this discussion. Wyking, some of your earliest activism, I know we've heard about, you being a third generation community builder and how your grandfather really was so integral in, work here in the Central District and building that community. Just tell us about some of the ways that your earliest experiences are now influencing the way that you work and build up Africatown Community Land Trust.
Sure. I would say, my earliest experiences are really just, being in the room and alongside, my father, Garrett, what he would call OJT, which is on the job training, right? And so just, seeing his commitment to serving and building community, fighting for community, and seeing that things can happen when you embrace your power, when you're strategic and leverage your intelligence. He brought forth a lot of ideas and initiatives that were, probably ahead of his time, 30 years ahead, 40 years ahead. And, things were just catching up with that vision, and so, and then just, learning and from my, grandfather, my, knowledge of him is him driving around in his truck as an electrician and servicing the properties that he had in the community. Only later did I learn that, he was one of the co-founders of the bank. He was, set up the, getting Black contractors and to participate, when the post office on 23rd and Union was established, and, to then, now be building on that same site and making sure Black contractors are involved in the process. Is like, wow, okay, it's interesting, right? And then my father really putting up, reclaiming the legacy of Liberty Bank and just moving that forward. So we stand on the shoulders of giants and many others that are, not in my, family and the work that has established our communities. And so we honor many legacies in the work that we do today is, really taking the baton in the relay of marathon to move us forward, right? All of those entrepreneurs that made the Central District, a Black Wall Street of sorts, and so, we learned, and they did it under, adverse conditions, right? They didn't, so we still face a number of different adversities, which I'm sure we'll talk more about. But we also have a different level of access and resources. And it's important that we begin to really pool our really our intellectual capital and other resources as well.
Thanks so much for that, Wyking. We're going to go ahead and move over to the second question here. Marimba, Hill CDC is building New Granada Square. It's a $55 million mixed-use development anchored by New Granada Theater, new office space and storefronts, and 40 units of artist preference affordable housing. Could you speak to this and other specific successes that Hill CDC has experienced with regard to building community wealth?
Sure. So in terms of building community wealth, I would say that our efforts have largely been focused on the implementation of our comprehensive land use and quality of life plan, which is called the Greater Hill District Master Plan. So I know that Africatown has also recently gone through a planning process. I would say that that is absolutely essential for any community to be able to implement a long-term vision, because it is extraordinarily complex when thinking about all of the things that you have to do to carry out a vision to build actual wealth. So the first thing that comes to mind is that, our community plan talks a lot about economic development, economic empowerment, building upon the African-American cultural legacy. And so it has really been that framework that has allowed us to, as the Community Development Corporation, affirmatively advocate for equity and redevelopment. The Hill District is an 1,100-acre neighborhood located between two of the state of Pennsylvania's top economic generators, downtown Pittsburgh and the University District of Oakland. And so it is obviously, from a locational standpoint, situated for complete and total gentrification. Right. And so what our master plan, coupled with long-term advocacy and vision and generations of people who have been committed to this work, has done is allowed us to say, we have a specific vision here, and we are going to affirmatively push for that vision with our government partners, our stakeholders, the philanthropic community, as well as others. And so I would say foundationally, that is how we have been able to, kind of create a basis to promote wealth building, because it is very difficult to do if you don't have a basis. And so I would say that plan has really been our basis. And then from there, we've been able to say, okay, well, what is your MBE participation on a project? Our master plan expressly calls for 30% MBE participation and 15% WBE participation. So that's minority business enterprises and women business enterprises. It affirmatively calls for community ownership in our master plan. It affirmatively calls for first source hiring. It calls for community institutions to be a partner to from an equitable standpoint, right? And when I say equitable, I mean like actual equity in order to build our communities. And all of these things really contribute to being able to have a foundation to build wealth. And not to mention that we then take that plan and we implement it on a macro and micro level. So when we have smaller projects that may be coming before the community, we have a community review process where residents sit on a panel, they score plans against the master plan. That is then scored at, a level, if it's scored at a level of 80% or above, it goes to the whole community, and all residents get an opportunity to vote. And if the cumulative score is 80%, then we confer a letter of support to our mayor's office, to the city planning commission, to the state representative's office, city council, and so forth and so on. And so these are the kinds of things that have allowed us to really create some guardrails around our goal of creating wealth within our community, and specifically Black wealth, but also community ownership.
Amazing. I'm loving hearing this because there's so many different similarities. I'm sure, Wyking, as you were hearing that, there were some things going off in your head here. But straight to you, Wyking, because ACLT is renovating former Fire Station 6 into the William Grove Center for Cultural Innovation. This will be a hub for entrepreneurship and small business development in Seattle. And this week, ACLT announced a funding partnership with KeyBank to expand programming at WGC, which will be the nexus of the innovation ecosystem in Seattle Central District. Could you speak to this and other specific successes that ACLT has experienced with regard to building community wealth?
Yes. So the history, and this really is kind of continues the Liberty Bank story, right? We know that the flow of capital, access to capital into communities is always basically the lifeblood of the economy, right? And so for years, and even to this day, the flow of capital into Black communities, into Black enterprises, into Black, households has been restricted by various, policies and practices, the redlining, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's what Liberty Bank was established for, right? To support the flow into the community as a Black bank. And so William Grove Center emerged out of our work, starting with hackathons like the Hack the CD, and then when the Fire Station 6 was decommissioned on 23rd and Yesler, and a new fire station was placed on Martin Luther King, which actually took out an institution, which was the Central Area Motivation Camp rope program, rites of passage experience for young people in our community. Actually displaced a resource, an institution in our community. We looked at the opportunity. What would be the highest and best use of that space, right? How could we create something that is not only limited to constraints of the space, which is somewhat limited, but could actually be giving and supporting other things in the community, launching, growing, right? And so we looked at Innovation Hub. We know that our community has historically been entrepreneurial. We've had to be, because wages weren't enough. So then people have to have start a side business and a side hustle, right? And so making ends meet, right? And when I went to the African American Museum in Washington, D.C., one of the things that stood out to me is one of the large quotes. It says, making a way out of no way, right? And so when we think about innovation, that's really what innovation is. Despite constraints, you're able to create, solutions, a way forward. And that is integral to the Black experience in America, where we've been resource constrained, right? And so when we think about an innovation economy, and Seattle has become a mecca of technology innovation economy, this has grown around us. The fact that it has grown around us from Microsoft to Amazon is part of what's putting the pressure and displacement, because we haven't been equitably included and involved in that. And our genius and entrepreneurial spirit has not been a part of this larger startup, tech knowledge-based industry sectors. And so we looked at, okay, how can we bridge the creative genius in our community, the entrepreneurial spirit in our community with this? And so creating a William Gross Center for Cultural Innovation and Enterprise became a focal point that we worked on for years. And in the midst of that, we, being innovative, thinking, what can we do with what we have? We had an opportunity to pilot, hackathons in the community, and then Black Dot as a pop-up co-working and incubator space for entrepreneurs to really be able to learn what works for our community, because we can't just replicate what we see in another community, because the dynamics and the lived experiences are different. And so that process came to a head, and so Black Dot has been building on that. And we're able to build a relationship with Cassandra Mitchell from Key Bank over some time, which evolved into the investment, the 3-year investment, so $100,000 per year, to support and build upon the work of Black Dot, coming into William Gross Center in terms of supporting businesses in our community. We started with, the Black Dot was really around kind of the more high growth tech-based, enterprises. But what we learned is that's not where the majority of our businesses are in our community, and so we over just surveying over 500 business, many of them are, mom and pop, different stages of that. But we know that in 2022, every business is really a tech business, right? Whether you're doing transactions, social media marketing, and all of these aspects. So even if a business is not looking to reach 500, million users or be the next, Facebook or Twitter, they can still benefit from the business development methodologies that is, helping to grow these larger enterprises, even if you only need to reach 5,000, customers in your local area. And so that's really the approach that we've taken. And William Gross Center is a hybrid, so it's education and pathways around technology, but it's also supporting our businesses and entrepreneurs across different paths, including the creative industries, where we know how much creativity and cultural assets are monetized just in the society and in the world. So getting, again, more of our creatives to be, have that entrepreneurial background. And so the Key Bank investment is, again, building on the work of Black Dot, and then coming into the William Gross Center to really deepen our ability to provide more culturally responsive resources and solutions, as we're also looking towards, finance, capital access solutions as well. But we have to prepare our entrepreneurs, to be able and be structured to access that. And so, we're thankful for this, investment as a step forward. We think obviously there's a lot more that we can do, but this is an initial step. When we think about financial institutions, we think about, again, access to capital at scale, because if they exist at scale and they're servicing our communities at scale, then that we should be able to access that capital. And KeyBank is also our tax credit partner on the Africatown Plaza project, which I think about $37 million into that project. So this is just an evolving relationship, and we're looking forward to the William Grove Center really taking the work that Black Dot has been establishing over the last 5 years to the next level, or really 7 years now.
Yeah, amazing. Great. And shout out to you, Cassandra. Thank you so much. Amazing person.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, I saw that in the chat. Had to make sure we whoop you up. That is so amazing. And I remember some of the beginnings of that relationship. It's great to see it flourish that way. One of the next questions here is really about challenges, and both of you can probably speak to different kinds of challenges that you've experienced in your work around economic development in the Hill District and Central District. I'm going to come to you first, Wyking. What has been some of the surprising challenges that you may have experienced over the years, and how have you overcome those challenges?
Well, I mean, I think the challenges have been, well stated many times. Access to capital is definitely clear, but it's not just, finance capital. That's obviously a big part of it, but also the intellectual capital. If you think of our experience here, obviously we were brought here as forced labor and did that for many years, or hundreds of years we were forced, and the labor capital and the wealth derived from our labor we have not had the access to. Others have, continued to benefit it. It's been passed on along generations, and that compounding benefit has been a compounding detriment for us. And so the access to capital and then just being, a labor class, when we think about even the Great Migration, many of our grandparents, and whatnot, migrated here as laborers for better work opportunities, and then they were able to establish some businesses, often mom and pop size, but we haven't had as much opportunity to build businesses at scale, right? And to understand, kind of what that means. And sometimes even when we have had the knowledge, the political, the politics, the prejudices, the structural racism has prevented business from being able to grow. So the business development, when people are developing businesses, are they approaching it from, a market opportunity or just a passion, right? And so bridging that gap from, side hustle or hobbypreneur to, building a business, right? We've seen businesses in our community, because they weren't structured in a certain way, when the family, one generation of the family is looking to maybe retire or, transitions, it's not structured that the business can be acquired, right? Or it can be passed on in certain ways, succession planning. These are all, various challenges, access to legal and accounting, having those things, structured. We've met those challenges even as we've built spaces, to support Black businesses. But then we look at the tenant improvement costs, right? And how high those are, and that gap between, maybe, not having a space or having a space that was affordable and then having to come into a brand new space. Again, that's an access to capital. We've seen that with our Black businesses in the contracting space, when we've been striving to maximize participation of Black contractors in rebuilding the communities that they're from. And again, access to capital, back office, these different things become, challenges. And so I think we've been quite successful around their contracting, and we can, talk more about that. But access to capital as well as knowledge and information. We know that business happens a lot of times through relationships. We've seen a lot of institutions, making declarations, particularly around diversity and equity. But even some of those institutions have programs that support businesses, but they're not customers, right? So, and thinking about, how do these institutions in our community, hospitals, education, university institutions, how are they better customers to the same businesses that they're supporting, So we see a lot of opportunity. And that's, really what our focus is around. The Key Bank will support some cohort, cohorts deepening their, technical knowledge and expertise, to expand their customer bases coming into the community, as well as youth entrepreneurship. I talk about history. I mean, I was, doing running car wash business, as a very elementary age, got to high school and, started clothing lines, just being a serial entrepreneur without any type of place to really go to get any specific knowledge, right? And so looking at how we really support our young entrepreneurial minds at an early stage is also very important.
Yeah, amazing. And it's great to be able to knock down the barriers that they may experience as young entrepreneurs. I agree with you. I had a babysitting business. It was thriving too. So I remember those days.
Right.
Thank you for that context there. And Marimba, when we think about some of the challenges Hill CDC has maybe faced, how have you all overcome some of those challenges? And maybe what were some of the surprises? Because, we, as Wyking laid the foundation there, some of that may be very similar to what you experienced there in Pittsburgh, but tell us about anything that was really surprising to you in terms of challenges and how you guys have overcome them.
Great question. First of all, I want to echo everything that Wyking said. I mean, we literally, I would echo everything that he said. Not one thing is a standout for our community or set aside for our community. I would say that, let me start with the fact that the African American community has not been able to accumulate generational wealth has really hampered our current entrepreneurs' ability, as well as our institutions, nonprofits included, to compound wealth, right? Because if you don't have wealth, you can't compound it. And you can't do things like guarantee real estate deals. And so I would say that that's like a really big one, is that one of the reasons why we are not seeing, or we haven't seen to date, we're seeing a little more of that now because there's been a lot of advocacy around this particular issue. While you're not seeing as many African Americans developing their own community at scale, is because it takes a lot of wealth to guarantee bank loans, tax credits and those types of things. And in some cases, those programs have a very, very, very small failure rate, right? And yet you still have to have maybe $3 million, $5 million sitting in the bank to even access that capital. And so I would say that that is a really difficult barrier to overcome. Now, I've been doing some advocacy nationwide on this particular issue. There are some banks and CDFIs and even some of the housing finance agencies who are looking into creating guarantee funds. I know that a couple of philanthropic organizations are also looking into it, but that is something that is needed now. I oftentimes say it's really Black and Brown communities that are left to be developed in America, right? And rural communities, right? Like when you think of cities, your everyday city, most of those cities are developed except for Black and Brown communities and rural areas. And so who's going to develop those communities, and who especially is going to develop them if Black folks and other people of color do not have the wealth to guarantee their own projects? So that's a really big issue, I think, in our community when it comes to scale and development. I think the other thing is, and this is also scale, since Wyking hit on a lot of the key items, I would say that, like, how do we, we oftentimes talk about leveling up, right? Like, we got to level up, like that's our favorite term these days. But like, seriously, like, how do we, once we go through those base level entrepreneurship training cohorts and classes, once we go through some of those entry level cohorts and classes, how do we really level up? And I that's one of the things that we are focused on at our organization. How do we really plug in that gap so that once you go through some of those entry level courses, that you can scale to the point where you are not just self-employed, but you are an employer of others. and that those employ, and that you are growing at a pace that ensures some long-term viability and sustainability. Incredibly hard. I mean, I've run my own business. You know, I'm an entrepreneur turned, you know, turned nonprofit executive, but I am truly, you know, enterprising in an entrepreneurial way. And so I know how hard it is to scale a business. And some of it is access to capital. Some of it is access to knowledge, access to mentorship. You know, generally, you are mentored by people who are in your community. You are mentored by people who have an understanding of your industry or your path. Because we have not had as many opportunities to scale and grow businesses to large scale enterprises, that amount of the mentorship that you would need in order to do that and learn that is not necessarily going to come from your own community sometimes. And so it really does require a lot of resilience and creativity, a lot of courage to go into spaces that you traditionally would not go into, that you oftentimes may not even feel welcome in, right? In order to do things that we have not done, or that have been hampered by institutional racism and other barriers. And then the last thing I'll say is that I want to talk about the dog that caught the car, right? And so I would say in our community, we've caught a few cars, right? We were able to negotiate a community benefits agreement. You know, this did involve a lawsuit in particular, but we were able to get 40 million plus to one part of the community that has largely been disinvested in for generations. The rest of that goes back to the developer on the large scale destination site. I'm speaking about the Lower Hill District in particular. I mean, that's pretty significant, right? Because that capital can be utilized for small businesses, that capital can be utilized for residents, that capital can be utilized for real estate projects, but then the capital has to also be managed, right? The capital has to be agreed upon. And the capital is coming to a community that has largely been locked out and doesn't have a lot of wealth. And so a lot of times people, they lose it a little bit sometimes when they, you know, because $1 million is a lot of money if you've never even been thought about for $10,000, $15,000, $50,000, right? And so how do we manage the dynamics around securing resources for our community? And I oftentimes talk about how do we build community while building community? Because you can lose the community while you're trying to build community if you're not conscientious about the how. And so I want to point that out as I think as something to always be mindful of. And I would also say, you know, just remembering that as community builders, and I always talk about this with people, particularly those who look at advocates and activists and community developers and community folks, right, as kind of transactional people or pawns on a chessboard. You know, you just kind of move them around how you need to move them around. You hire this person, you give this nonprofit some resources, you make sure this small business gets some resources, you know, you kind of just to advance the path forward for your own business. And this is oftentimes not businesses from within our own community, right? These are people who want to advance large scale plans, right? But they have resources so they can move people and things on the chessboard, however is necessary. But I always remind folks in those kinds of situations that remember that we really are a community, right? We may just be, you know, a part of a specific issue that you're dealing with, but at the end of the day, our kids go to daycare together, we go to church together, right? We pass each other in the grocery store, right? Like we really are a community. And so treat that with a level of tenderness and respect, because when the project gets done, when the work is over, at the end of the day, really what we have is each other.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I just wanted to just add to Marimba's point as far as challenges around and the opportunity to have businesses that are employers. You know, I think American Enterprise Institute or something, they had a report that 98% of Black business are solopreneurs, right? And if each one of those businesses could just hire one person, right, and businesses that are employing one person could hire 2 to 3 people, we could make a significant dent in Black unemployment and underemployment, right? Just from within the community. Because one thing I don't want to, we are a rich community and we've contributed significant capital to the American enterprise, right? And so we take an asset-based approach. Now, we may not have access to our capital, right? It's like you have an inheritance, but there's some bureaucratic processes stopping you from getting to it, but it's still yours and you have to figure out and solve that problem. So that's part of our work. And so, just getting, again, those solopreneurs to become business and employing businesses is significant. I see the Postman is here. I see Kiana Pickett. I just really want to shout them out because they've come in and they've really demonstrated that, and now they're moving into the tech space as well. And I know navigating that is not easy, right? Another thing is that less than 2% of venture capital, which is usually going into high growth, tech-based businesses, goes into Black businesses, but we still represent 13% of the population, over $1 trillion in, consumer power. And that's just locally, but our culture also is impactful globally, and so those are some points that we want to address and opportunities that we see in this space, and bridging those gaps.
Yeah, wonderful points indeed, by both of you. And thank you so much for expanding on that. The next question here is really dealing with, the approach to this work. And, clearly there are some unique characteristics, whether you're in Pittsburgh or Seattle or whatever, but there are some unique characteristics to our community. So the innovative part of the work you do, the way you do it, partnerships, strategies, approaches, connection to community relationships. I'll come to you first on this one, Marimba. What are some of those key things that you see as the innovative ways that you guys do your work at Hill CDC?
Well, that's a tough question for me because, I sometimes have to say now is not the season to innovate, Marimba. I have to talk myself back a little bit because that's my jam, right? So I would say process is important, right? Process is important, and I think that creating processes that are super intentional to yield the outcome that you desire is innovative. Because a lot of times we just kind of let the process kind of happen, right? It's just we kind of borrow a little bit from this person, borrow a little bit from that person, but it's not really intentional, right? The right people might not be at the table. You might not be thinking about all of the different components of the outcome that you're trying to generate, and so I would say be innovative in the processes that are created to deliver the outcome that we all hope is a sustainable outcome. So that would be the first thing. And so I would say our community review panel, called the Development Review Panel, is super innovative. It is, again, a panel of residents who scores our master plan. Then the whole community gets to know. We literally have a ballot box for residents to go and vote. You know what I mean? So I think that those kinds of things that are really about power sharing are super innovative. We really are big on transparency. So we, share just about all of the things on our website, on our social media platform. I think that courage is really innovative these days, right? Because it is not in large supply. To do this kind of work, to secure the kinds of resources that you need to do the kind of work that we're trying to do, that in and of itself, to step out and say, I'm not willing to accept the status quo. I'm not willing to accept that all we can do is 10% for our own community, in our own community, right? And so I think that demonstrating more courage and taking chances, right? Taking that chance to fail. The tech sector is really well known for giving lots of money, normally to young white guys, to take the chance to fail, right? And so I mean, that's a great practice to achieve something new and creative, but you don't always feel like you have an opportunity to fail when you're in the kind of work that we're in. And so really, I would say we need to ensure that we are advocating for the kinds of support from philanthropy, from our local governments and so forth, to have those opportunities to take chances. So that would be another thing that, philosophically we do. We are building a city block, right? And we are anchoring that block in culture. And specifically, we're building upon the African American cultural legacy. We are betting on culture. And so, to have a building that is first committed to creatives and artists, ensuring that the retail is accessible on a long-term basis to small businesses, really targeting and attracting and working with Black-owned businesses is really important. And we are specifically interested in a Black tech hub and innovation hub. And so we're working to ensure that Black entrepreneurs, specifically who are in innovation, I should say diverse entrepreneurs, but specifically Black entrepreneurs who are in the innovation and tech sector, find a home here in the Hill District. Again, we have Carnegie Mellon University here in the city of Pittsburgh. We have the University of Pittsburgh. These are two institutions that are very well known for their innovation. Now, the University of Pittsburgh is partnered with us, and they're going to anchor 20,000 square feet in the development that we're doing, right? A part of that, it will be a digital inclusion center, as well as a broad array of other culturally relevant programming responses. But, Carnegie Mellon can be connected, right? Google is here, Netflix is here. Like, we really want to see these mega businesses invest in the entrepreneurs that are here or who would come here if they knew that they could have that wraparound support. And so I tried to take it from kind of like out of the box innovation to in the box innovation, if I may. But thank you for the question. I think it's a great one.
Well, love hearing all of that, because that's the kind of stuff that gets really exciting about this work. There are very specific approaches depending on where you are to build upon the resources that are there. So really love hearing that, Marimba. Thank you. Wyking, when you think about the innovative approaches that Africatown Community Land Trust has taken to do your work, there are specific strategies and partnerships. And you were talking about, just that work to get Black contractors on these jobs. Tell us about some of those innovative tactics that, ACLT uses in its work.
Sure. I think when I think of innovation, it's not always necessarily creating something new. Is taking what you have and rearranging, how those things may be related, right? Or taking a solution from another area and then applying it to a new area. So then something new kind of comes out of that, and I think a lot of the tools that we have used are not really new tools, right? A land trust, that was 1969. We had our first session here with Shirley Sherrod of New Communities, Inc. They established the first land trust in 1969. Community benefits agreements, which, when we have our MOUs, they're basically reflective of that. But I think part of it, to the point that, an important point that Marimba made, was just really having the courage and the audacity to act with entitlement, that we deserve the same things that others, are normally entitled to, right? And to also define ourselves from an asset-based perspective, from a value add, really highlighting the fact that we've added value to this city, to this country, and to the world, for, time forever, right? And so really, when we started our planning process, we looked at Seattle 2035 comprehensive plan. We didn't see ourselves. So we started Black Seattle 2035. And the question around, imagining Africatown was about, what can we be inspired by from the greatness of our past? So we have all these assets, whether it's, the Hill District and the legacy, there, to Motown, to, Harlem Renaissance, to Black Wall Streets all over the country, to, the jazz and legacy of the Central District of Seattle, which gave, Quincy Jones and Jimi Hendrix and Ray Charles and Ernestine Anderson, to the world, right? How do we bring that energy forward in new ways, right, in terms of building our community into the future, right? And looking at the uniqueness of the Black diaspora experience as a resource in itself, right? And then leveraging that resource to, create new enterprises, new experiences that, again, are value adds and create opportunities for value exchange, transactions, business, in community. And so we, had that planning process. And then out of that planning process, we established our equitable development framework to shape how we enter into partnerships, right? And define what equity is. Because a lot of times these words are used, and they don't really have too much meaning. So when we say equity, as Marimba said, equity meaning actual equity, ownership. That's what it means kind of in the capital, society economy that we live in, thinking about how our projects are measured by how much resources from the project actually go into our community. So project by project, it can be objectively evaluated by dollars in terms of budgets and square feet in terms of the space that and who's accessing it and who's prioritizing, whether for residential or for commercial, right? So those are some of the, I think, kind of just bringing things together in a new way, bringing tools that may be out there and put them in context, thinking about, again, foreign concepts, which the language is foreign, and so it makes it inaccessible for our community, but our community may already be doing these things. We are innovators, have been innovating, we've just been limited in terms of where our innovation can be applied, right? And how much we're able to actually monetize from that. So when you think about, being related to really getting it from our sweat, right? Sports and entertainment and how much innovation happens there, right? But again, being limited, not having the networks and all the industry and all that in our community that's being derived from our, our culture and our innovation in these spaces, right? You think about, just fashion, how much we influence style, but yet again, these enterprises are not rooted in our community. We've had moments with the Carl Kanais and the FUBU, but how do we again take these things to scale so they're not even just limited to selling in our community, but being able to sell in the global community. And I think that's another part of our approach with Africatown is being locally rooted but globally connected and developing, mutually beneficial relationships to understand how do we, improve our position in the global economy by leveraging whatever our local resources are. We're a tech hub here in Seattle. So how is our community, advancing technology in ways that may be beneficial to the Black diaspora in other places in the country, et cetera. I think just in the contracting, joint ventures, right? Like, how do we get Black contractors that, everyone says, we want Black contractors, but they don't have the capacity, right? So joint venture is not a new tool, right? But, advancing that strategy to build capacity so that eventually we do have Black general contractors in this state that can build projects at scale, of, Africatown Plaza, which is 126 units, or Liberty Bank, 115 units, or the former Cairo site we acquire, which is going to be probably 300 units, right? And so incubating them to grow capacity, and then they're bringing subcontractors along with them. And then they're bringing workers who may be the future business owners along with them, and starting those workers with the idea that there's other skills to learn besides the trade so that they can become an entrepreneur in the space and be ready to, grow and have a next generation of Black contractors. So I think, the perspective is what shapes everything. The resources already exist in the environment, but it's just, arranging things in ways to have greater impacts. And another thing, we always look at what can we do now, right? So in the, I guess in the startup world, it's considered a minimum viable product. What can you do now to kind of test something out, right? And so when we talked about a Black tech ecosystem and innovation, we just started with a hackathon. That was a 3-day event. We did that a couple of years, right? And learned from that. And then from there, we said, well, we need a space. Okay, well, there was a building, Midtown was going to be tore down. And so we, put Black Dot to incubate that and start that there. You look at the work that's happening at Midtown Center and Africatown Plaza. We did an installation that was for, 6 months, but it represented what we aspire for the future. So some people say, well, why would you do all that if it's going to be torn down? But now if you go and look at the site, you see the same concepts that were demonstrated on a small temporary scale now reflected on the buildings there. Black, people, the architecture is Afrocentric, Black businesses are being prioritized in the commercial space. So, when we think about, so I'll just stop there. I think those are some of the ideas, and just building relationships and connecting with people and being a bridge, right? So someone may have a resource here, but they may not have access to our community, may not know how to approach our community. And so we're able to translate, our community members, they have value that maybe not be able to articulate or frame what they're doing in a certain way that's valuable. And so, being that bridge, I think is key as well. So those are my thoughts on just, innovative approach. And there's so much more to come. And the main point that I would make is that if you wanted to go to a space in our community to find innovation, right now, there is not that place per se, right? And so when, we have to go outside of our community, and we don't want to perpetuate that innovation and these, capabilities don't exist within our community. So creating, just again, a hub, a place of connection and nexus, for interactions to happen, because usually that's how innovation does happen. Different people, different ideas, different perspectives, looking at a problem and then combining their different perspectives to come up with solutions. And I think clearly we have problems and we have solutions. We've been solving our problems and then thinking about, again, just making space for those connections to happen so new things can be created and born.
So they can be birthed. Yes, go ahead, Marimba.
Triana, I just want to, first of all, Wyking, I love just listening to you. It's so fulfilling in that, we share so many of the same, so many similarities in the work. That's why we're here, I know, but it's so edifying, right? It just reminds you, you may be a little off, but you're not completely off. And so I really appreciate, you sharing your vision and your work in that way. But the reason why I wanted to, make a comment is just to remind us that there is nothing more innovative than a mother of 3 feeding her kids on $18,000 a year. There's literally nothing more innovative than that, right? But we have not figured out a way yet, I don't think, to translate that kind of innovation that has been happening for centuries, right? Since the beginning of time, since capital, at least currency, was created, into modern day innovation and our understanding of it. And it's such a huge miss because there are so many more people like that than the people who are viewed as the innovators of today. And so I just want to remind us to add on to Wyking's comments about, just all of the things that are built upon our inherent innovation, the culture that comes from Black people and from the African-American community, that we still have to figure out how to mine that innovation and put it on center stage for the world to be in awe beyond what it already is, admiring of us in our.
Yeah. This is just such a great conversation. I just appreciate both of your brilliance, really pouring into this. There's so many comments I have, but we'll move forward. Before we take some questions, I want to remind folks now is a great time to start putting your questions in the chat. We have a couple that we'll get to in a minute, but one of the predetermined questions I want to really get to here, because we're talking about, centering this discussion around, building Black Wall Streets and being on the legacy of the greatness of Black Wall Streets. And I want to say here that, ACLT has been holding some community events, opening the doors for Black businesses, vendors, Black Wall Street, Juneteenth, Soul on the Water, Emoji Fest. There's so many events that ACLT has done in terms of ensuring that there's an opportunity for Black businesses and entrepreneurship, but also, seeing Black entrepreneurship as a pillar for social change in Black communities. And so I lead with that for ACLT. And for Hill CDC, you guys are also doing similar work with Beauty Works, Hill Tech Society, Hill's Kitchen, really integrating the idea that Black entrepreneurship is a real pillar of social change. And so, Marimba, can you speak to how you guys are kind of anchoring that in terms of, the work that you're doing, understanding that Black enterprise and Black entrepreneurship is that one of those pillars that we need to build on?
Absolutely. So we work with about 100 entrepreneurs a year, and we partner with a number of organizations within the local ecosystem to ensure that those businesses have the support that they need. We believe that, we focus on 3 specific buckets: people, place, and policy. We build up the people while we build up the place. And we know that all of that happens in the context of equitable policy. And so our entrepreneur work is entrepreneurial development work is rooted in an actual market study, right? Wyking said something extraordinarily wise at the beginning of this conversation, and that is, what are the needs of the community and what is the market, right? And I think passion is super important. I'm very fortunate and blessed to have finally been able to work in at least one of my passions, right, for a living. And so I understand that drive, right? How can we pair passion with market opportunity, though, right? Because what we want is not for our businesses to be out there on an island trying to create a market, although you can do that, it's extraordinarily hard, but rather to take advantage of the market that already exists. And so that is what our entrepreneurial work is about. It's how do we, and again, we're a place-based organization. So we are thinking strategically about who's going to go into this space that we are building. And how can we be assured that they are going to have a chance, because small business is hard enough, a chance at success. Well, one way to do that is to ensure that we know that the market exists before they're there. So we know that there's a huge market for beauty. We know there's a market for tech. We know there's a market for contracting. So we have a Hill Builds program. We know that there is a market for product-based businesses. You know, we have a lot of service-based businesses in our community. And I always say there is a cap to what you will ever earn in a service-based business, because you are trading time for money and there are only 24 hours in a day, right? But a product can sell while you're sleeping, and you can sell as many as you can get out there per hour. Right. And so we've done product-based cohorts. And so really that's our philosophy. And again, moving forward, we're really focused on next level, right? What are the gaps that need to be filled? Our upcoming cohorts will be focused on tech and food. Because we have retail space coming, right? We need restaurants. We'll have a food hall. Foods of the African diaspora is the theme for that food hall. So, you know, Creole, soul food, you know, Caribbean food, like, you know, all of the things that we love. And so we need to make sure that we are circling back around to be certain that our businesses are prepared for that, not just philosophically prepared, not just an entry-level course, but an actual course where they land in a space that they're responsible for working and for, you know, for building their business within. And so I think that that's one of the distinctions between just kind of programmatic organizations and, you know, community development organizations who are trying to build physical space, as well as the economic development of the people of that neighborhood and the surrounding area.
Thank you so much. Real quick, Wyking, in terms of, you know, Black entrepreneurship as a pillar for social change.
Yeah, I mean, we surveyed 500 businesses, you know, which are mostly businesses that came out to our markets. You know, 85% of them said that, you know, they needed help, you know, building their business. You know, only 33% had a marketing plan, right? 17% had legal, you know, counsel or, you know, resources, right? And so we, you know, see what some of those gaps are, but we see, again, just opportunities when we think about the Liberty Bank building and the 3 commercial spaces there. One that was able to bring, you know, keep Earl's Cuts and Styles, been in the community 30 years and was at risk of displacement due to redevelopment. Communion, right? A longtime caterer, Christy Brown and Damon Bomar, mother-son duo, longtime caterer in the community, you know, did not have a brick and mortar, right? And so many, you know, traditionally may have been very difficult to get access to a commercial space, right? But got that space, got support and, you know, innovative, you know, alignment of capital, you know, to do the TI, you know, within the first year, this business is recognized as one of the 12 best new restaurants to open in the world, right? Been to the Today Show, you know, James Beard Awards, right? Nominations, right? So we just have to be able to make the space. Our culture, you know, our innovation has always been valued, right? It's just the fact that we haven't always been given the space and the resources to take things to another level, and others stand in the gap of that, you know, and often capture the generational wealth from it, right? Because again, there's only so many stages you can be on. You can only play basketball for so long, right? But the owners, right? They own an asset, right? And they continue to pass that on and leverage those assets. So this is why we think, Black, business development is a great opportunity, right? Because our culture, whether you call it hip hop, soul, gospel, salsa, capoeira, Afrobeat, these are all different aspects of Black diaspora culture, right? So imagine going to a place where you can experience all those and more. Jazz, right? You can have food from, the Southern Soul experience, Caribbean, Afro-Latino, West Africa, East Africa, right? When we give that vision of Africatown, people are like, where? When can I go there, right? But the initial reaction, because of the anti-Blackness that has been programmed into the society, is, whether it's white or Black, is like kind of hesitancy, right? Because we've been given a narrative about Black and, the places that we occupy being places of deficit, places that you want to avoid, et cetera. And we know the reality is much different because people are always striving to get to our culture, right? And I'm not limiting our economic opportunities to our culture, but that's a huge market opportunity that's right in front of our face that we don't have to look far for, but we can innovate in every space, just like you've seen across any space that we were actually able to get into. We were able to innovate, and so we think that's the opportunity, and that's what we're going for. And when we do events, and we're able to do our Black Wall Street event that we started on the 100th anniversary of the bombing of Tulsa, when we put 200 businesses out there, the vision is that those businesses can one day be permanently in structures in the community. And we're slowly taking steps towards that, right? Each year, more Black businesses are reopening in the Central District. And what I will say, I went to Tulsa recently and had an opportunity to contribute to some of their planning about revitalizing and sharing some of our learning from here. Most people don't know that the bombing, which took place in 1921, wasn't the ultimate destruction. That the community actually by 1925 had built back actually greater, right, than it was. And the heydays were in the 40s, right? And what actually killed it was putting a freeway, urban renewal, and the Federal Highway Act through the community, and then, desegregation, and then others having access to our markets, but our businesses not really having access to others' markets, right? And so just that spirit of resilience is really what I want to highlight, in terms of the ability to build back, even in the face of such a traumatic and destructive and horrible thing that happened in Tulsa, right? And that's what we're doing, with Africatown. I know that's what's happening with Hill District, but we have to get that spirit back into our community, because so often we've been, beat down, right? And so people are, sometimes just tired, right? And there's a right to be tired, right? But we see these opportunities, and we see progress, and we see a path forward to rebuild thriving Black communities. And that's why I think we're here today.
Yeah, that's right. Great questions and answers, really, from both of you. There's several questions here in the chat, and when something you just said there, Wyking, takes me to a question here around how we deal with some of our community members that still may be stuck in some of the negative mindset. When we talk about growth and we talk about innovation, doing things different, how can we be sure that, those people that may, kind of be stuck in a comfort zone of playing the victim, how do we bring them along? How do we ensure that they are a part of the growth and the vision? Marimba, how do you see Hill CDC kind of dealing with some of those, difficult community members that's like, they don't see the vision that you have? How do you bring them along?
Yeah, that is such an important question, and timely for us, because our community has been planned to death, as we like to say locally. And so folks are ready to see action, right? We've all been really hungry for results for a long time. And I always say development is easy. Equitable development, on the other hand, is very challenging. And so it takes longer. And we are all, who doesn't want a grocery store in their neighborhood? Who doesn't want community serving amenities in their neighborhood? Who doesn't want to be able to have dinner at a nice cafe in their neighborhood? Everyone wants that. And I think the question that we are going to have to struggle with as a community, I'm certain that it's just not in the Hill District, is what are we willing to, how long are we willing to wait? And what are we willing to give up if we choose to not wait, right? And what I know for sure is that gentrification awaits. I mean aggressive gentrification because of where we are located. And I know that we're not unique in that way. And so we do have a lot of people from within the community who think that waiting for equitable development will just take too long. So it's just time, let's just move forward, right? By any means necessary, let's just move forward. We don't care who owns it. We don't care, we don't care about any of those things. And so I think that for me, it's really just about, okay, well, let's walk that out a little bit, right? Does that mean that you're okay with the next generation being displaced? Does that mean that you're okay with this community no longer being a predominantly Black community, right? When we're still dealing heavily with segregation, right? There aren't a lot of places that, neighborhoods that are integrated. So if you're displaced from your own community, then, the likelihood of you landing in another community, that's within a reasonable distance is not very high. You're probably going to, kind of like the outer city or maybe even some rural areas, right? And I think that we have to be really intentional. We have to be very assertive about implementing our own agenda. We have to be courageous enough to, as Wyking said, be willing to arrange the resources that are available to us and that are already on the table in most cases, such that they come to our community so that we can implement the vision as opposed to just accepting anything. And I can tell you that it is a difficult thing to temper. And a lot of people believe that fighting for equitable development is obstruction, just because they want anything. But then people who are in community development do it for a living and are required to look at market studies and understand what gentrification means and how quickly people will be displaced. It's like, I hear what you're saying, you want this community to be, and your strategy is going to lead somewhere else based on what you just said, right? And so I think that ongoing involvement, conversation, and progress, like you just can't not do anything. We have things cropping up all over our corridor right now, right? Many years ago, the Hill CDC led an implementation planning process for our Center Avenue corridor that got adopted by our city, as well as our Urban Redevelopment Authority, who then released a redevelopment request for proposals on the streets, and resulted in a number of African-American developers having an opportunity to build the community, right? But that happened because we did the planning, and then government did go ahead and implement that. But the government owns the large majority of vacant land in our community, right? So it's a long stretch of road here. And that land can be available to those developers who got it for that first round, or it can be available to any old developer who walks in the street who has no connection or relationship with the community and could care less whether or not the people who are here are displaced. And so we just have to make a decision about what we care about for the future, not just for today.
Thank you so much for that. And I know we're closing in on time, so I want to make sure I get a couple of these. I want to make some notes here because
I'll just say to that point, show beats tell every day of the week, right? And so, more show, less tell. We got to tell our story, but, I think turning the rhetoric, and I understand why our community is cynical in a lot of times, because we've been sold a lot of everything that has ever been presented that hurt us was presented as something, usually to help us in our best interest, right? And so I understand why our community may be cynical, but I know our ancestors, if they were too cynical and became apathetic, we would not be able to be here today, right? And they were even under worse and more adverse conditions. And so for us, it's about turning things from rhetoric into reality and brick and mortar and saying, look what we've done, not to say, look how great we are, but if we were able to achieve this without you, imagine how much more and how much faster we could, achieve impact with you, because there's a lot more not involved than are involved, right? And so we've given evidence, right? It's no longer just faith. It's no longer just not seeing the first stair and taking it. No, you see a whole staircase now. Mm-hmm. So let's move and let's escalate and elevate. And so that's our invitation to community. We're not mad at anyone for not believing at first and needing to see something something before they get in, because seeing is believing, but there's room on the bandwagon, because there's a lot of work to be done, right? There's a lot of work to be done. So we got comforting seats, we got comfortable seats on the bandwagon, we may even bring you some water, right? Come on in and get involved. That's our message in terms of those who, are less confident in the work. But some people just need to see, because they want to make sure when they invest their time and resources, something will actually be returned from that investment. And we can appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And I agree 100% too. So thank you for summarizing that question there. There was a lot of questions that we couldn't get to in the chat. So I'm trying to do like a quick little tidbit here, because John Moore is working in development in Southern California, is wondering how, they can do this work there in SoCal, Watts, Lamar Park. So there's definitely ways for you to tap in. We keep saying tap in. And what does that mean? And what it means is, get connected with these organizations, get plugged in to what they're doing. There are volunteer opportunities. There are ways for you to be engaged in community development sessions, design discussions. There's a lot of different ways for you to be tapped in, meaning plug yourself into the work. And I'm sure, John, we could find ways to get connected, with these amazing organizations here. The information right there is in the chat, so you can look at their websites and all of that. We're going to be bringing Miss Jacqueline, who is the vice chair of Africatown Community Land Trust, to talk to you a little bit about how you can donate. But there are also other ways you can donate your time, your talent, your treasures to these organizations. So we'll make sure that we cover that. I want to also just sum up some of the comments here. There was a really great comment about how Black Wall Street, there's some information and evidence of that, it negotiates the history of capitalism as a destructive force in Black community. The original Wall Street was founded as a slave market, and the economic structure of the U.S. has been built on the backs of our people. So how do we avoid replicating exploited systems? I think you guys have kind of really spoke to that, because it's about the intentionality and connection to communities. And one of the last things I want to summarize here, Melanie has some really great comments about the means of production for opportunities. How are we offering community certain opportunities in terms of the means of production? How can we ensure that we're, stocking a clothier with machine producing, that has its own machine producing clothes, a knickknack shop that is stocked by people in the community, rather than importing folks in to keep more capital in the hands of the community, and allowing ourselves to be mindful about how we build business. So thank you so much, Melanie, for your comments there. Also a great comment here, like, hey, some Asian restaurants are stocked because they'll take charity from food banks, right? And they're stocking their stuff with canned goods and other things that they can use. I think it's great to be mindful of that. So I just want to thank everybody, because you guys have really participated here, and due to time, we're unable to get to everything, but I definitely want to thank Marimba and Wyking. Let's just all clap it up for them. Amazing conversation. Of course, if we had more time, clearly we would keep this going, but I just want to thank you both for your expertise, your knowledge, and really your passion for this work. It came through so clearly for me, and I'm sure for many of you out there in the audience, because both of you really exemplify what it means to not just do this work, but to have this work embed in your person, right? This is something that you carry with you everywhere you go, and it's very clear. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. Of course, I want to bring over Miss Auntie Jacqueline. We're going to be talking to Auntie about how we can be intentional to donate to these amazing organizations. Take it away, Auntie Jackie.
Thank you, Triana. So right now we want to give you a couple of minutes to donate to these two organizations that are doing amazing work. But in the meantime, I do want to share my personal connection to Africatown Community Land Trust and why the work of Hill CDC and ACLT matters. So my personal connection, I'm listening to Marimba and Wyking, and I tell you all, I'm a lifelong resident of Seattle's historical Central District. Back in the late 1940s, my parents migrated from Louisiana without jobs and very little money, but they had big hopes and dreams to create a stable life free of the racist Jim Crow laws of the South. And with the help of my grandfather, my parents were able to purchase the home in 1947 that I'm blessed and fortunate enough to still live in today. Y'all, that was 75 years ago. So if you can see my screen, my queen mother is behind me. She died at 95 years old, but she was excited and passionate about the work of Africatown Community Land Trust. So I watched my parents struggle to acquire home ownership, to create a legacy for our family. And it also taught me that Black folks are resilient. We can make a way out of no way. My father owned and operated the first Black driving school, Smith Driving School, which allowed people coming from the South, they didn't have Washington State driver's license. So my father had a thriving part-time business helping people to pass their Washington State driver's license. He had a car with 2 sets of brakes, and I loved being in the back seat when he took out a client and helped people learn how to parallel park and pass their tests. So I have experiences as a child remembering supporting Black businesses, not only supporting them, but also they supported and gave me work ethics. My first job as a 16-year-old was working for the Facts newspaper, and then I worked for the Seattle Medium newspaper, both Black-owned newspapers. They taught me how to take messages, return phone calls, problem solve. So a thriving Black community, absolutely, we were that. And again, dry cleaning, going to Mrs. Spate's Dry Cleaners on Madison. It was a close-knit Black community where you can walk into a business and they say, how's your mom? How's your dad? And I went to school with the Spates. So it was always that connection. I hear you, Marimba, when you say that we pass each other in grocery stores, that we go to church with each other. We are a community. I believe that what you and Wyking talked about today, what comes from the heart, oh yeah, it reaches the heart because Black lives matter. Thriving Black communities matter. And so I'm excited and I'm excited about the work because I see the revitalization of Seattle coming back. Right here in Seattle on Jackson is the Africatown Community Land Trust office. We also have Catfish Corner, A for Apple Daycare. There's so many businesses that are coming back. And I'm super excited to hear about KeyBank donating to the William Grove Center project. Y'all, it's time to, like Marimba said, level up. Wyking has said tap in. And how do you do that? You do it now. Look at the websites and please take time, immediate action to support Africatown Community Land Trust and Hill CDC that are working to build community wealth for Black residents in Seattle and Pittsburgh. So as a part of our hashtag Thriving Black Communities campaign, our goal is to raise $100,000. That's right, y'all, $100,000 to support our economic development work. Come on, y'all, embrace your power and help to advance the initiatives that Wyking and Marimba have discussed. Your contribution, small or large, will help push us towards the future of Black Seattle and Pittsburgh. Reimagine that. Africatown Community Land Trust and Hill CDC are both 501c3s. And if your company is one that matches employee donations to nonprofits, this is a great opportunity to take advantage of this type of giving program by donating now. You can give now by going to ACLT and Hill CDC donate pages. Links are in the chat and on the slide behind me. Again, I've been inspired by this conversation. I know that you have too. I just want to put a shout out again that we will be supporting this week for Seattle residents, Soul on Water, Black vendors, food trucks, live music. Y'all come out and get some wonderful products from Black businesses. And then boots on the ground on Sunday. We'll be back at Othello Park for the Othello Marketplace. I hope to see you out there. I'll be at the booth buying products and also educating about the mission of Africatown Community Land Trust. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. God bless, and I'll see you next week.
Okay, there we go. Thank you so much, Auntie Jackie. Thank you. Amazing story there and great sharing. Appreciate you for being here and for giving that ask to the people. You guys, she is absolutely right. Make sure that you guys and women and people, sorry, I keep saying guys, but I want to just say, make sure everyone here is being plugged into the work. When you're inspired, it really means that you can now see yourself as a part of the solution, as I'm always encouraging folks to do. I want to also make sure you guys are reminded that next week, our conversation series will end. Will be the final conversation on July 7th with the change maker who's been featured on Ellen's show and other national outlets. Wyking will be in conversation with Mama Shu from Detroit about how we can use arts and culture as tools for community building and healing. You do not want to miss this last segment in our series. Of course, you can register right now at africatownlandtrust.org, or you can click on the Eventbrite link in the chat. We'll continue to learn from each other's successes, share challenges, build collective impact, and raise funds to support ongoing efforts. Can't wait to have you guys join the next conversation. And all of you, everyone here, thank you all for coming and for supporting the work of these amazing organizations. We'll see you guys next Thursday.
Thank you for attending New Models for Creating Thriving Black Communities and Inclusive Cities. Make sure and register for the next program and chat your thanks for our amazing speakers today.